The biggest mistake people make when texting someone they like is thinking the goal is to keep the conversation going at all costs. It isn't. The goal is to create a connection where both people actually want to keep coming back to each other. Because if you've ever sat there staring at your phone thinking, should I text him again? Was that message too much? Did I sound too interested? Should I wait an hour before replying? Then you already know how quickly texting can turn from something fun into something emotionally exhausting. And here's the truth. You do not need to become a master strategist to make a man interested in you. You need to understand what makes communication feel good. You need to understand what makes someone feel seen, what creates curiosity, and what allows attraction to grow without pressure. And that is what I want to talk about today. There are 3 texting principles that can completely change the way you communicate with a man, not because they manipulate his emotions, but because they create the conditions for genuine connection. And the first one is probably the most important. Stop trying to impress him and start making him feel understood. Think about the difference. Imagine a woman is talking to a man she really likes. She wants him to think she's interesting, so every message becomes an opportunity to prove something. She tells him about all the things she's accomplished. She tries to sound clever. She tells stories designed to make herself look impressive. She carefully chooses every word because she wants him to think, wow, she's amazing. There's nothing wrong with sharing your life, but if every interaction becomes a performance, something gets lost. Now imagine instead that she notices something about him. Maybe he tells her about a project he's working on. Instead of simply saying, that sounds cool, she says, you seem like someone who really enjoys figuring things out when everyone else has already given up. Suddenly, the conversation feels different. Why? Because she hasn't simply reacted to his words. She has noticed something about him that matters. Human beings are drawn toward people who make them feel seen, not flattered. Seen. There's a huge difference. Flattery says, you're amazing. Being seen says, I noticed this specific thing about you. And that second one feels much more personal. So one of the most powerful texts you can send isn't necessarily something seductive. It can be something as simple as, I like how passionate you get when you talk about things you care about. That message doesn't demand anything from him. It doesn't say, please like me. It simply communicates, I noticed you. And here's what most people don't realize. When you make someone feel seen, you create emotional depth without having to manufacture intensity. But be careful. There is a difference between noticing someone and constantly validating them. If every text you send is praise, you can accidentally create a dynamic where you're trying to win his approval. You're so amazing. You're so handsome. You're so talented. You're perfect. Eventually, those words lose their meaning. Instead, become curious. Ask questions that reveal who he is, not interview questions, not 20 questions, real curiosity. What made you choose that? What do you enjoy most about it? What's something you could talk about for hours? And then actually listen to the answer. Because attraction isn't only created by being interesting, it's also created by being interested. And that brings us to the second principle. Don't make every conversation about maintaining attention. Give the conversation room to breathe. This is where so many people become anxious. Now, the conversation is going well. You exchange messages. He responds quickly. You laugh. Then suddenly he takes longer to reply and your mind starts creating a story. Did I say something wrong? Is he losing interest? Should I send another message? And before you know it, you're no longer responding to the person, you're responding to your fear. That distinction is incredibly important. When you text from anxiety, you often send messages that aren't really expressions of what you feel. They're attempts to control the outcome. You might send another question just to keep the conversation alive. You might send a random message because silence makes you uncomfortable. You might even deliberately delay your response because you think being unavailable will make you more attractive. But neither extreme creates real confidence. Real confidence sounds more like this. I enjoy talking to you, and I don't need to force this conversation to continue every second. That is a completely different energy. You can send a warm message, you can flirt, you can show interest, and then you can put your phone down. You don't need to monitor the typing bubble. You don't need to calculate response times. You don't need to turn texting into a psychological chess match. Because here's the surprising part, space can actually help you understand the connection. When you stop filling every silence, you get to see whether the other person naturally reaches towards you. Does he initiate? Does he ask questions? Does he remember things you've told him? Does he continue conversations? Does he suggest meeting? These behaviors tell you much more than whether he used 3 heart emojis instead of 1. And this is where healthy attraction differs from manipulation. Manipulation says, how can I make him chase? Confidence says, let me see whether he naturally wants to move toward me. That difference will save you so much emotional energy because you don't want to spend months trying to create interest in someone who isn't demonstrating it. You want to notice reciprocity. You want to notice effort. You want to notice consistency. And this brings us to the third principle, which is where texting can become genuinely exciting. Use your messages to create emotional experiences, not just exchange information. Think about most conversations. How was your day? Good. How was yours? Busy. Same. What are you doing? Nothing much. You could text like this for 6 months and learn almost nothing about each other because information isn't the same thing as connection. Connection happens when the conversation creates a feeling. Maybe you make him laugh. Maybe you remind him of a funny memory. Maybe you challenge him playfully. Maybe you tell him something unexpectedly honest. Maybe you say something that makes him curious about you. Imagine he tells you he has a terrible taste in movies. Instead of responding with, "Ha ha, really?" you might say, "I'm going to need evidence before I believe you. Give me your top 3. Now there's energy. There is something to respond to. Or imagine you're talking about travel and he says he wants to visit a particular country. You could say, "Okay, now I'm curious. What is it about that place that has you so obsessed?" Again, you're opening a door, you're giving the conversation somewhere to go, and you don't need to be constantly funny or seductive. You simply need to be present. That's the real secret, because the best texters aren't necessarily the people who know the most clever lines. They're the people who know how to create emotional movement. A conversation moves from curiosity to laughter, from laughter to vulnerability, from vulnerability to anticipation, and eventually from texting to real life. Because that's another thing I want you to remember. Texting is not the relationship. It's the bridge to the relationship. If you become obsessed with creating the perfect digital connection, you can accidentally avoid the thing that actually matters, seeing how you feel around each other in real life. A man can send you beautiful messages every morning and still not be capable of giving you a healthy relationship. And someone can be a mediocre texter while being incredibly consistent, attentive, and loving in person. So don't use texting as the only measurement of someone's feelings. Look at the whole pattern. Look at what happens when you need something. Look at whether he respects your boundaries. Look at whether he makes time for you. Look at whether his words match his actions. Because the strongest attraction isn't created by the perfect message. It's created when two people repeatedly experience each other as safe, interesting, enjoyable, and genuine. And if you take nothing else from this, take this. You do not need to become less interested to become more attractive. You need to become less afraid. There's a difference. You can be warm without chasing. You can be playful without performing. You can be interested without abandoning yourself. And when you stop asking, what can I text to make him want me? And start asking, how can I communicate who I genuinely am? You stop dating from fear. You start dating from self-respect. And that changes everything. And once you understand that, there's another shift you have to make, because even when you know not to chase, it's very easy to start using texting as a way to measure your worth. You send a message and then you wait. He replies quickly and suddenly you feel secure. He takes several hours and suddenly you feel rejected. He sends a short answer and you start analyzing every word. He said, okay. Why did he say okay? He didn't ask me a question. Does that mean he's losing interest? He used to send good morning texts. Why didn't he send one today? And this is where texting can become emotionally dangerous, not because texting itself is bad, but because you're allowing another person's phone behavior to determine how you feel about yourself. You have to separate two things, his communication pattern and your personal value. They are not the same thing. A delayed message doesn't mean you're unattractive. A short reply doesn't mean you're boring. And a man being inconsistent doesn't mean you need to work harder to become worthy of his consistency. Sometimes the healthiest response to confusing communication isn't a better text. It's observation. Watch. Let his behavior give you information. Because if you're constantly trying to repair every moment of distance with another message, you never discover whether he would have moved toward you on his own. And that brings us to something incredibly important: reciprocity. Healthy attraction has movement in both directions. You don't always have to be the one starting the conversation. You don't always have to ask the question. You don't always have to make the plan. You don't always have to rescue a conversation when it becomes quiet. Imagine you're standing on one side of a bridge and the person you're dating is standing on the other side. You can walk halfway across, that's effort. You can wave, that's interest. But if you walk all the way across the bridge, pick him up, carry him back, and then wonder why he isn't pursuing you, you've missed the point. You want to leave room for someone to participate. And that doesn't mean playing games. It doesn't mean deliberately ignoring messages. It doesn't mean pretending you're busy when you're actually staring at your phone. It means you have a life that continues whether or not he texts you. That is one of the most attractive forms of confidence. You're not thinking, how do I make him wonder where I am? You're simply living a life where you don't have to wonder where you are. You know what you're doing. You have your friends, your goals, your work, your studies, your hobbies, your health, your ambitions, your own emotional world. And when a relationship enters that life, it adds something. It doesn't become the entire structure holding you up. But here's where people often misunderstand independence. Being independent doesn't mean acting cold. You don't need to become emotionally unavailable to prove that you're strong. You can say, I loved talking to you today. You can say, that made me smile. You can say, I'd like to see you again. There is nothing weak about expressing genuine interest. In fact, there is tremendous strength in being honest about what you want without demanding that the other person give it to you. That's the difference between vulnerability and desperation. Vulnerability says, I like you. Desperation says, I need you to like me so that I can feel okay. Those are completely different messages. And the beautiful thing is you can communicate the first without falling into the second. Let's say he sends you something funny. Instead of trying to manufacture an impressive response, just respond authentically. That actually made me laugh out loud. Simple, warm, real, or perhaps he tells you about something he's been working toward. You could say, I can tell this really matters to you. I hope it works out. That creates warmth without over-investing. Or maybe you want to flirt. You don't need a complicated technique. You might say, you're making it very difficult for me to behave seriously right now. That's playful. It creates a little spark. But notice what it doesn't do. It doesn't beg for reassurance. It doesn't demand a response. It doesn't say, please prove you like me. It simply expresses a feeling. And this is the heart of confident communication. You are not using your words to extract an emotion from someone. You're using your words to express your own emotional world. That's a much healthier place to communicate from. And now I wanted to talk about something that can completely change your texting experience. Don't confuse intensity with intimacy. Someone can text you all day and still not know you. Someone can send you hundreds of messages and never make a real effort to meet you. Someone can call you beautiful every night and still be emotionally unavailable. So when you're dating, don't just ask, how much is he texting me? Ask, what is this communication actually building? Is it building trust? Is it building curiosity? Is it moving toward real-life connection? Is he becoming more consistent? Is he making space for you? Is he getting to know your world? Because attention isn't always investment. That's a lesson worth remembering. You can receive enormous amounts of attention from someone who has no intention of building anything. And you can sometimes receive less digital attention from someone who is genuinely interested but simply isn't a constant texter. That's why context matters. The goal isn't to make him addicted to your messages. The goal is to create communication that reflects a healthy connection. And here's another powerful principle. Give him something real to respond to. Instead of sending messages that close the conversation, create openings. Compare these two texts. I'm tired today. There's not much to work with. Now imagine. Today was exhausting, but something happened that completely made my day. Now there is curiosity. What happened? You've created a natural opening, or instead of, my weekend was good. Try. My weekend was unexpectedly chaotic. I have a story for you. Again, you're not manipulating him. You're sharing your world. You're giving him an opportunity to step into it. And if he doesn't take that opportunity, that's information too, because a confident woman doesn't endlessly manufacture conversation for two people. She offers, she observes, she participates. She allows the other person to participate too. This is especially important if you've developed the habit of overgiving. Maybe you've been the woman who always checks in, always asks how his day was, always sends the good morning message, always remembers the little details, always makes excuses for his inconsistency. And perhaps you've told yourself, I'm just showing him I care. But caring without boundaries can turn into self-abandonment. You can care about someone and still notice that they aren't meeting you. You can understand someone's circumstances without accepting crumbs indefinitely. You can be compassionate without becoming their emotional caretaker. And this is where self-respect becomes incredibly attractive, not because self-respect is a trick that makes someone chase you. It's attractive because it changes the way you carry yourself. You stop negotiating against yourself. You stop thinking, maybe if I send one more message. You stop asking, what can I do to make him choose me? And you start asking a better question. Is this person showing me that he deserves access to me? That question shifts your entire dating experience. Because now you're not auditioning, you're evaluating compatibility. You're not trying to convince someone that you're valuable. You're discovering whether they have the capacity to recognize and reciprocate your value. And there will be moments when you need to tolerate uncertainty. That's part of dating. You cannot control another person's feelings. You cannot guarantee attraction. You cannot create commitment through the perfect text, but you can control the way you communicate. You can control whether you abandon your standards. You can control whether you keep living your life. And you can control whether you allow someone's inconsistency to become your obsession. So the next time you're tempted to send that extra message because you're afraid the connection is disappearing, pause. Ask yourself, am I sending this because I genuinely want to say it or because I'm afraid of what his silence means? That one question can save you from so much unnecessary anxiety. Because sometimes the most confident message is the message you don't send, not as a tactic, as self-awareness. You realize, I have already expressed interest. Now I can let him respond. And if he responds warmly, beautiful. If he reaches toward you, meet him there. If he makes effort, appreciate it. If he continues showing consistency, allow the connection to develop. But if he repeatedly gives you very little, don't turn that into a challenge. You don't need to win someone over. You need to find someone who wants to meet you halfway. And that's where texting stops being a game and starts becoming a window into compatibility. Because ultimately, the person who is right for you won't require you to become a completely different version of yourself just to hold their attention. You won't need to constantly calculate, you won't need to perform, you won't need to live beside your phone waiting for evidence that you're enough. You will still have moments of uncertainty because you're human, but there will also be a growing sense of ease. And that ease is powerful because attraction should create excitement. It shouldn't require you to abandon your peace. And this is where everything comes together. The real power of texting isn't in finding some magical sentence that makes a man fall for you. It's in learning how to communicate from a place where you already believe that you are worthy of being chosen. Because when you believe that, your messages change. You stop trying to sound perfect. You stop editing every sentence 10 times. You stop wondering whether an emoji was too much. You stop thinking that you have to maintain his attention every minute of the day. Now, instead, you become present. And presence is incredibly attractive. So let's bring the 3 principles together. First, make him feel seen rather than constantly trying to impress him. Notice the little things. Remember what matters to him. Ask questions because you're genuinely curious. If he tells you something important, come back to it later. Hey, how did that thing you were working on go? That tiny message can mean more than a paragraph of compliments because it communicates something powerful. I listened. And being listened to is one of the most underrated forms of intimacy. Second, allow space. Don't panic every time the conversation slows down. Don't assume silence automatically means rejection. Give him the opportunity to initiate, contribute, and show you who he is. Because you don't want a connection that only exists because you're constantly pushing it forward. You want a connection that has its own momentum. And third, create emotional experiences rather than simply exchanging information. Make him laugh, share something genuine, tell him a story, be playful, be curious. Let him discover different sides of your personality. Because people don't remember every sentence you sent. They remember how they felt while talking to you. But there is one more thing I want you to understand. Never use these principles to become someone you're not. If you're naturally affectionate, you don't need to pretend you're cold. If you enjoy texting, you don't need to suddenly disappear for 12 hours. If you like telling someone you had a great time, tell them. Confidence isn't pretending not to care. Confidence is being able to care without losing yourself. That's a very different thing. You can say, I really enjoyed tonight. You can say, I'd love to see you again. You can send the first message sometimes. You can show excitement. You can flirt. You can be vulnerable. And you can still have standards. The problem isn't caring. The problem is when caring becomes chasing. And chasing usually begins with one small belief. If I can just do a little more, maybe I can make this work. So you send another message, then another. You become more available. You tolerate less effort. You explain away inconsistency. You start accepting things you would normally tell your best friend not to accept. And eventually you're no longer building a relationship. You're trying to convince someone to give you one. That's exhausting. And you deserve better than that. Imagine a woman who receives a message from a man she likes. He says, "Hey, sorry, I've been busy." The old version of her might immediately reply, "No worries, I completely understand. What are you doing tonight? How was your day? Are you free tomorrow?" She's trying to restart everything, but a grounded version of her might simply say, "No worries, hope everything's okay." And then she continues with her day. Notice the difference. The second woman isn't playing hard to get. She's not trying to punish him. She's simply refusing to carry the entire interaction. If he wants to reconnect, he has room to do that. And if he doesn't, she gets valuable information. This is what healthy dating looks like. You're not trying to predict the future. You're gathering information. Every interaction teaches you something. Does he show curiosity? Does he remember things? Does he initiate? Does he follow through? Does he make plans? Does he respect your boundaries? Does he make you feel emotionally safe? These questions are far more important than, why did he put a laughing emoji instead of a heart? Because sometimes we obsess over tiny digital signals while ignoring the obvious behavioral ones. A man can send you "good morning, beautiful" every day and still never make a plan. That's not the kind of attention you should build your hopes around. Look for action. Look for consistency. Look for effort. And remember this, texting should complement attraction, not substitute for it. If he likes you, texting can give that attraction somewhere to grow. But texting cannot create genuine compatibility where none exists. You can't message someone into becoming emotionally available. You can't send the perfect paragraph and transform an inconsistent person into a consistent partner. And you shouldn't want to, because the goal isn't simply to get the man. The goal is to find a relationship in which you feel respected, desired, understood, and secure. That's a much bigger goal. And sometimes that means walking away from someone who gives you incredible chemistry but terrible consistency. That can hurt because chemistry can be intoxicating. You can think, but when we're together, it's amazing. Maybe it is, but a relationship isn't built only in the moments when everything feels amazing. It's built in the ordinary moments, the follow-up text, the plan that actually happens, the conversation after a disagreement, the way someone responds when you express a need, the consistency between what they say and what they do. That's where character appears. So don't let texting become a place where you lose your perspective. Let it be a place where you express yourself. Let it be playful. Let it be romantic. Let it be imperfect. You don't have to sound like the most fascinating woman on earth in every message. You just need to sound like yourself. And if you're worried that being yourself will make someone lose interest, ask yourself a deeper question. Would I really want someone who only likes me when I'm carefully performing? Because the right relationship isn't one where you constantly manage someone's perception of you. It's one where you gradually become more known, more honest, more comfortable, more yourself. And that is why the most attractive texting strategy is actually not a strategy at all. It's self-respect combined with genuine curiosity. It's warmth without desperation. It's interest without obsession. It's communication without manipulation. And perhaps most importantly, it's knowing when to put the phone down and return to your own life. Go for the walk. Finish your work. Call your friend. Read the book. Work toward your goal. Take care of yourself. Because your life should not pause every time someone you're dating sends you a message. The most magnetic person in the room isn't necessarily the person who gets the most attention. It's often the person who doesn't need attention to remember who they are. So the next time you're texting a man you like, don't ask yourself, what can I say to make him fall for me? Ask, what can I say that is honest, warm, playful, and true to me? Then send it and let the response be information. If he meets you with enthusiasm, enjoy it. If he becomes curious about you, explore that. If he makes an effort, appreciate it. If he moves toward you, move toward him. But if you're constantly moving towards someone who never moves toward you, stop calling that chemistry. Sometimes it's simply imbalance. And you don't need to chase someone into choosing you. You need to become so grounded in your own worth that you're willing to let the wrong person walk away. Because the moment you stop treating someone's attention as proof of your value, dating becomes lighter. You can flirt without fear. You can text without anxiety. You can like someone without losing yourself. And you can walk away without believing that their rejection means something is wrong with you. That is real confidence. Not, I don't need anyone. But I would love to share my life with someone wonderful, but I will never abandon myself to keep someone. That is the standard. That is the mindset. And that is the kind of communication that creates the possibility of a healthy relationship. So remember, don't chase the perfect text. Create genuine connection. Don't try to control his feelings. Pay attention to his behavior. Don't make his response your emotional scoreboard. Keep building your own life. And don't become less loving because you're afraid of looking too interested. Become more secure. Because when you can be warm and still have boundaries, interested and still have standards, vulnerable and still have self-respect, you become incredibly difficult to manipulate and incredibly capable of building something real. The right person won't require you to disappear to become attractive. They'll appreciate your warmth. They'll respond to your effort. They'll be curious about your world. And they'll make it increasingly clear that they want to be part of it. So send the message when you genuinely want to. Laugh when something makes you laugh. Tell him when you enjoyed seeing him. Ask the question because you're curious. And then breathe. Put the phone down. Go live your life. Because your worth was never sitting inside that little message bubble. It was always yours.